Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football podcast to continue on with the Steelers now. More on the Steelers sort of topic. We're moving more so into the OTAs, mandatory minicamp sort of stage of this offseason. And it has been reported, sources told ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, that for the first time in Cam Heyward's career, he will not be attending the OTA portion of the offseason in order, according to Jeremy Fowler and sources in ESPN, to try and work out a contract extension with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Cam Heyward extended on this report, speaking to Steelers Now, saying that we've talked about an extension. We'll see what happens. My goal is to play 2 or 3 more years, mostly 3. I'm looking for an opportunity. We'll see what happens. I'd like it to be here, but my goal is to just play. Heyward is 35 years old currently, and with the Steelers, he is on a contract, on a 4-year extension from that deal that he got in 2020. So with that deal, he is earning about $16.4 million per year. And with that, it's not one of the top earning contracts, obviously, with so many other defensive tackles, defensive ends, interior linemen, whatever you want to diagnose it as. Getting those extra contract extensions right after him. You know, Cam's been in the league a while. He had that extension 4 years ago now, so a lot more deals have been made, have been given out since then. But his expected salary cap hit is expected to be $22.4 million, according to SpotRack. And he is entering now that final year of that 4-year contract extension at 35. You know, there are some variables that come along with this to sort of determine what do we make of Cam Heyward not missing or missing OTAs for the first time in his career. Last year, it was pretty rough for Cam Heyward with injuries, with that groin injury. He only played 11 games, and I say only 11 because because he has been playing at least 15 games in every year of his career, except 2 where he suffered pretty significant injuries. So he's been pretty reliable up to this point. So missing, 7 games if my math is right, and only playing in 11 games, it is surprising for someone as consistent and dependable as Cam Heyward because of all that I mentioned and bringing the production along with it. But that's also where I wanted to go. After back-to-back seasons with 10 or more sacks, he recorded only 2 last season. Again, he did suffer with that injury, but you might be thinking 11 games, 2 sacks, it might not be as much as a lot of people expect, but now you sort of project going forward, and you don't hope this to be a regular thing for Cam, but again, 35 years old at the position that he plays, always being involved in contact, in scrums, in piles. How does that take a toll on his body? I think if anyone deserves the benefit of the doubt is Cam Heyward because of how consistent he has been. But the question now is, does it still make sense for the Steelers to extend Cam and really just give him more money than he already makes with him being 35 years old? Right now, it is hard to tell in my estimation of this whole situation, just getting the initial feel about how this all could play out. With Cam Heyward, I think the Steelers would love to get an extension done, but the money is always the most important thing. I don't think the Steelers are one team to easily just hand out money just because of a nostalgia sort of personal relationship sort of scenario. You saw it a little bit with Najee Harris. They, as good as Najee's been, as much of a leader has been, and as much, if you follow Steelers, you could tell how much the Steelers like Najee. They decided not to pick up his 5th-year option. So that's pretty telling to me that they mean business. Omar Khan, their new general manager, isn't one to really fool around with anything. He takes things very seriously, and I think the biggest thing for the Steelers and how they handle these deals is just seeing it out on the field and sort of proving that you deserve an extension or that 5th-year option or a whole new deal if you're playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's something that I actually just saw on my phone here. A source reporting on the Pittsburgh Steelers is getting the feeling that the Steelers want to see how that injury sort of develops, how Cam Heyward looks coming back from that groin injury in mandatory minicamp and in training camp before they start deciding on how much money they're going to give him. maybe they give him the same amount that he's working with now. Maybe he finds that okay. He hasn't said that he wants more money. He just wants a new contract and extension. So how that money all works out, if he's getting the same amount as he is right now, I'm sure the Steelers would be fine with that. I feel like if they would have had a problem with it, it would have already been brought up. How Cam Heyward feels about it, he is getting older, so it isn't strange for older players to not show up to these voluntary workouts as well. You see it all the time, maybe with quarterbacks now not showing up there, or just other veterans around the team that you kind of what you're gonna get from them, so you don't really need to see them out there if you can depend on them to train on their own, get the same amount of production in off the field or away from the team, I should say, than they would being there. It's not that it's not necessary. Of course, probably teams would love them to be there, but at the same time, if they decide it's not what they want to do to sort of preserve their body, it is what it is. I think Mike Tomlin, from what Ryan Clark on ESPN has said, seems like that kind of coach, referencing a story that a similar sort of situation happened with himself and Troy Polamalu a few years ago when they were in the latter stages of their career. So it seems like Mike Tomlin and the Steelers right now don't see it as a big deal, but him missing it for the first time in his career does say something to me. And also, you have that other perspective, that other side of the coin, where you have to look beyond the stats, the production, I think, for a player like Cam, and that sort of leadership, how much of a prominent figure he is, not just as a Pittsburgh Steelers player, but in the community and everything like that. To just see him go without a blink of an eye so quickly like that, I think would be pretty devastating, honestly, for the city of Pittsburgh. I don't think it will happen right now, but it is something now thrown into the sort of atmosphere of pondering over where this could all sort of take a turn in the near future. I think for right now, it's just a waiting game. The more the offseason develops, the more we'll know about this, with how Cam's feeling and how much deeper they get into contract negotiations. But you look at just other players around his position making around the same amount of money, Vita Vea, Jonathan Allen, and others around his position. Those guys, I think right now, if you look at them and compare them to Cam Heyward, the stats don't look that much different. So if you just want to base it off of production, and if you're Cam and he wants to ask for more money than the $16.4 million that he's making, I think it would be a hard sell for the Steelers to look around and compare him to other players around his position making the same amount of money. If they're all producing the same, what reason is there for the Steelers to give him more money at 35 years old if he wants to play 3 more years as well? I think from that standpoint, you could allocate that money in other resources. So that's sort of where I stand on it. That's how I see it. Right now, it's in the very early stages of this entire thing. For Cam to play that much longer, I think says a lot about him, how motivated he could be. That's another factor that you might have to take into account if he comes back more motivated, has a comeback year. It's hard to do at 35 years old, but also I don't think people would be all right to doubt Cam for how consistent he has been, even as he's headed into his 30s. It's not like he's had a huge drop-off until now. Other than the injuries, he's still been out there consistently. Maybe not putting up the sack numbers, but just being out there, being somebody that the other team has to account for, I think is also something that has value in it of itself. So we'll just see how this all plays out throughout the rest of the offseason. The Steelers don't have many other contract negotiations or extensions to really work out other than fifth-year options that they might have to think about with Justin Fields or Najee Harris. If they play out this season and really impress them, that's something down the line that they could address. But for right now, they are fortunate to not be in a bind trying to re-sign all these valuable players, so they can allow this to carry on and really focus on other parts of their team, like figuring out the quarterback situation, who's going to play at left tackle, at right tackle, what's the wide receiver situation going to be? Are they going to sign someone? On the defensive side of the ball, can they find somebody else opposite of Joey Porter Jr.? This seems like a big story, but I think the Steelers have a lot of other things that they have to tend to before they start panicking on Cam Heyward maybe not playing this season. That's where it stands right now, and that's where we'll leave this topic. And in the meantime, we'll move on with the rest of the show. A few more things to talk about. I mentioned Mike Zimmer and his vision for the Dallas Cowboys defense in his first season is coming up right after the break. And also talking about Odell Beckham Jr.'s move to Miami, what he said at his introductory press conference, what are my thoughts on it, and how he can carve out a role for himself in that Miami Dolphins offense. So stick around. All those topics are coming up in just a few seconds. Don't go anywhere.